And I think in terms of the vision, I mean, there's a lot, as you said, there's been a lot of skepticism and there's been a lot of criticism and what have you. And, I frequently, if I'm outside the kingdom, I have people talking to me about this and they will say to me, well, what about this program? Do you think it's going to succeed? And what about this? Is it going to succeed? And is this part of the vision going to succeed, et cetera, et cetera? And, my response to them is that actually you've got the wrong end of the stick here, because what you're talking about are specific National Transformation Program projects. You're not talking about the vision. The vision is precisely that, a vision, and it's intangible, yes? And therefore, if you look at Saudi Arabia today and you ask yourself, has the vision succeeded? The answer is yes, it has already succeeded.
This is the 966.
This is the 966, Richard, our 30th episode. Well done, sir. Mabruk.
Mabruk to you. And, we should take a moment to recognize the extraordinary technical work you're doing on these things. So if anybody's seen these, obviously the audio is pretty, but the video is gorgeous. And those are production values from one Mr. Lucian Ziegler.
Well, thank you so much, sir.
It really shows. And, we have a strategy here and we have some ideas about how we want to take it. We're not all the way there, but behind the scenes is your magic, and it's showing. It looks great.
Thank you very much. We make a great team. We're a lean team, and we've got an awesome show today. Right. We've actually got a lot to get to here this week. We'll be discussing, what many are wondering now, where is U.S. shale as gas prices rise? We'll talk about some more progress for Saudi women and a rainy season wadi full of other topics. Our main segment today will be, we have just the brilliant Dr. Mark Thompson on the show with us. He's written extensively on Saudi Arabia, including his latest book entitled Being Young, Male in Saudi. He's also head of the socioeconomic program at King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies. Mark will join us in a bit from just a short 12-hour flight away in Riyadh. And so thanks to all of you for being here as well. For those of you who are new, and Richard, we are getting a lot of new folks listening to us each week, which is awesome. Subscribe to us, please. This makes the delivery of the show automatic to your device and doesn't cost a thing. Just helps us a little bit. Shukran to everybody. Richard, let's get started. What's your one big thing this week?
Okay, I'm taking a big swing here. Please be patient. The question is, where is U.S. shale? I'd have been happy to avoid this topic. It's broad and complex. Also, as I've stated many times on this show, I am not an oil expert. However, I felt like I needed to understand it better myself. So here goes. All right, so things we know. 1, U.S. shale oil production transformed global energy markets when it helped U.S. oil production go from just under 4 million barrels per day in September 2008 to 13.1 million barrels per day in February 2020. 2, despite rapid depletion rates, shale oil production is cheaper and faster to bring online than traditional methods of oil production. 3, thus, by 2014, U.S. oil, specifically shale oil, was widely used as the swing producer, a role OPEC and specifically Saudi Arabia had held for decades. 4, as I've said on this show, by 2014, U.S. shale oil set the ceiling for global oil prices, leaving OPEC to try and maintain the floor as best it could. So, with oil prices currently about $130 a barrel going up, U.S. gas prices over $4 a gallon, inflation racing, Russian oil imports are embargoed in the U.S. and shortly will be in the U.K. The Biden administration is imploring Saudi Arabia and the UAE to increase production, negotiating with Venezuela to get their sanctioned oil back online, and musing about the 103 million barrels of oil that Iran has in storage waiting to be released if a new JCPOA agreement is reached. Joe Biden himself recently declared that U.S. shale producers, quote, have 9,000 permits to drill now. They can be drilling right now, yesterday, last week, last year. Joe was pretty adamant about this. So U.S. shale is surely barging through the door any moment, right? No. U.S. This is, and at the end I'll get to 2 macro thoughts that I think are useful in looking at all this. So U.S. oil production is up. U.S. production was almost 11.6 million barrels a day in December, up from a low of 9.7 million barrels per day in February of 2021. The number of American oil rigs have increased steadily since July 2020, when the country reached a low of 172. Currently, 519 rigs are recorded last week, which was up from 480 rigs the first week of the year. Just by comparison, by the way, the United States had more than 800 rigs in the field in 2019. So the 519 right now, even though it's up, is still down from previous highs. Still, U.S. shale won't be saving the day anytime soon. Why? All right. One, the oil price crash in 2020 forced shale exploration and production companies to drastically cut their capital programs and lay down rigs. Scott Sheffield, CEO of Pioneer Natural Resources, one of the leading shale oil companies, confirms that, quote, "We have shortages of labor, sand, and equipment, and it is going to take a good 18 months just to ramp it up. If it is a long-term problem, U.S. shale can respond and help the world, but it's going to take time and lots of caveats." Amos Hochstein, the U.S. State Department's energy envoy, by the way, who's made some trips to Saudi, said that in recent meetings and phone calls with oil companies, executives indicated that the federal government has little to do with their difficulties lifting output. Quote, "I asked most of them, is there anything you need from the administration to increase production? And they said, no, unless you can help me with sand or labor or other supply chains." 2, shareholders of publicly traded oil and gas companies are demanding that production growth take a backseat to more cash back to shareholders through dividends and buybacks after a decade of overspending burned investors. Aaron Weiss, Deputy Director of the Center for Western Priorities, quotes, "The energy industry doesn't have a permitting problem. It has a financing problem." Lenders also have become more wary of funding oil-related ventures as environmental, social, and governance ideas catch on, and financial circles are still unwilling to give money to most of the nation's oil field service companies, or to smaller oil producers that want to expand their operations. And we know that. We've talked about it before. So I'm going to close with 2 macro observations that are interesting, because it sort of talks about shale's role. As I said, it had become the swing producer. Here we are in a crisis. It's not producing. I always thought that, one of the advantages of U.S. shale was agnostic. It's not political. It's sort of specifically related to it's price sensitive. Well, it's not price sensitive. And we see there's all sorts of reasons why it's not coming online to the scale we want. But here's going forward. John Hess, so this is 3. John Hess, Chief Executive of Hess Corporation, recently made a fascinating point when he noted that U.S. shale is no longer the world swing supplier. As the business has matured, shale companies have a limited remaining inventory of drilling locations following a decade of exploiting shale rock, he said. Quote, "It's a 10-year-old business. There's only about a 10-year inventory of shale drilling locations left, maybe 15, Mr. Hess said. People are going to be more judicious about how they accelerate in this emergency situation." This is fascinating to me. So what he's saying basically is it's going to run out. And and maybe it'll run out by the time that the world globe's weaned itself on fossil fuels, off of fossil fuels. But this is an interesting point when you look at it from the Saudi perspective. 4, Daniel Ramey, an economist who studies the industry at Resources for the Future, concludes that in the medium to long term, the best thing the United States can do for energy security is reduce its consumption of fossil fuels, limiting exposures to volatile swings in crude prices, and freeing up more oil and gas to be shipped to allied countries. He said, quote, "As long as we use oil, we are dependent on every other country in the world. It includes Saudi Arabia and Russia. It also includes major consumers like China and India, because when their consumption goes up, prices go up for us. Consequently," Ramey points out, quote, "there is no energy independence when it comes to global oil markets," unquote. So I just thought this was extremely interesting when I got into this. I understand the sort of operational logistics difficulties in bringing it back online, but these bigger picture issues, and talking about there's an end date for U.S. shale. I hadn't really thought about this. And
Sorry, please.
And then the final, it's sort of an obvious statement, and because energy independence has been a holy grail for so many people in so many countries, but particularly the U.S. And the reality is there's no such thing.
So first of all, really excited that you chose this topic this week, and especially since we've been doing a lot on oil in recent weeks. And after Ukraine, we've had some great interviews with energy experts, Kate Durian, former Reuters reporter. We had Adam Saminsky on from KFCRIS. We've talked a lot about energy, but it's sort of like we're taking a chance now to sort of look at America as an energy producer. And with all that's going on in Ukraine right now, what's interesting as well to me is the first question that family members and friends ask me is, hey, is Saudi Arabia going to produce more oil so that the price of my gasoline doesn't go up? And the answer to that is it really, truly is not that simple at all. And as we discussed, Richard, in previous episodes, 70% to, I think actually 80% of Saudi crude goes to Asia. So there's your answer. Right. If they turn the spigot on, the proverbial spigot, more oil would go to Asia. But it isn't even about that. It's about the fact that the United States does produce a lot of oil, but these are different types of oil of different grades. And the oil that we need in the refineries we have here are importing oil from around the world of a different type of grade that they are meant to refine. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, and I would add, in terms of when you get down to the nitty gritty, so replacing the embargoed Russian oil, it's not a lot. In terms of all Russian oil and petroleum products, it's about 700,000 barrels a day. Actual crude is like 200,000 barrels a day, so it's not a lot. And when you look at say, for example, at U.S. shale, which has proved capacity of 13 million barrels per day, we can make that up simply. But almost all that Russian oil goes to the coast, East Coast, West Coast. Why? Well, because there's a regulation in the U.S. that tanker size has to be limited if you're transporting fuels from port to U.S. port. So there's not the super tankers that can do it. So consequently, for oil producers and refiners and shippers, it doesn't make sense. They lose money if they put it in a ship. So they don't, and they don't have pipelines to the East Coast and the West Coast. So this Russian oil typically has been shipped into the L.A. or the East Coast, and so replacing it isn't even as simple as we can replace it here from Texas, because there's no pipeline from there to California or to the Northeast that can do it, and the shipping it doesn't make economic sense. So there's always these details, just like you say, and your friends who say, well, they just turn on more oil and we'll be okay. It's just never that simple.
Well, it's really interesting too, because the other question that I get is, and Richard, I'm sure you get this all the time, is, wow, the Saudis must be stoked that oil is now up at $130 a barrel or $110 a barrel. That means that they have a lot more money. And in reality, yes, that's very true in the short term, but the reality is every time oil gets that high, American politicians, really everyone around the world says, I think it may be time for us to rethink our energy mix here. But those are things that in the long term erode demand for crude oil. So every time we have this rethink of what's going on, that's essentially why Saudi Arabia says, well, we are a responsible producer along with OPEC and OPEC Plus. We don't want the price of oil to be too low, but we also don't want it to be too high, which is interesting. And then the second thing that I would just add to this, and this was a really great piece from you, but are we going to invest the tens of billions of dollars, maybe even more than that, needed to completely revamp how America produces and refines and distributes oil? Or are we going to take that money and invest it in clean energy and other technologies that are more longer term? And I think that the answer depends on the price of oil in the medium to long term. If 2 to 3 months from now we're still here with really high oil prices, maybe we do a little bit of both. The better spending of money is for the long-term solution to become less dependent, not just on foreign oil, but on any oil. And so that's going to be the next policy challenge facing Congress. This is just such a fascinating space right now, and there's so much going on. It was really great because it was just really cool to look at sort of where America does import oil from. 52% of it is from Canada. 11% comes from Mexico. So there you go. So 63% of imports are from Canada and Mexico. And then 11% are from OPEC nations, and 7% of that comes from Saudi Arabia. Right. So, for the Saudis to turn on the spigot, what are they going to do? Give us a little bit more. It just doesn't really work that way. And that's what's so difficult about all of this.
I think those are good points, and you might add on the Ukraine situation, when you essentially are seeing a major economy decoupling from the global economy, and having ramifications throughout significant potential reduction in economic output, which means less demand for energy. So the Saudis don't like any of this.
Mm-hmm.
The high price, okay, they're going to benefit from it. But it's not their preferred. It's not their preferred situation. They'd like to get to a little more level status quo that's much less volatile.
And Richard, you and I are very interested in sort of how the public sees problems. I mean, it's just like, because it's a great barometer about what's going to happen in the situation in Ukraine. We sort of, on last week's episode, we were sort of wondering like where the U.S. would come down, where the U.S. American attitudes would come down on the war in Ukraine. And since then, Biden has banned Russian energy imports. And what was really interesting, and we included this in on our website, sustg.com, but a recent poll by Quinnipiac University, which sort of took the pulse of adults in the United States. And I thought, frankly, shocking to me was that 70% of U.S. adults said that they would be okay with higher gas prices if it meant sticking it to Russia, basically. And it's really rare to find bipartisan consensus on really anything, and especially when it comes to economic bread and butter issues like gas prices. But that's a really high number, and so that just shows you the sort of the support for the American response to Russia's invasion in Ukraine, but also that Americans are sort of united on this, and that they're willing to pay a little bit more at the pump as their way of supporting Ukraine. I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
It was encouraging, and hopefully it will sustain. And I want to only modify. I know you're kidding about sticking to Russia. I mean, I think Americans are heartened by however you perceive this situation, but I think most Americans feel like we're on the right side. We're on the right side of the law. We're on the right side of responsible behavior, trying to maintain a global system that works for everybody. So, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think Americans have felt like they've been on the right side for a while. It's not that they haven't supported things or they don't understand, but I don't think many Americans, I think a lot of Americans weren't quite sure what to think about our invasion of Iraq, and certainly the 20-year struggle to occupy and reshape Afghanistan was a divisive issue. So, I mean, speaking as an American, I feel better about this. I think we're doing the right thing, and that it's an important thing for us to do, along with our allies in Europe. So I think that feeds into a willingness to take it on the chin with regard to inflation and gas prices, and I hope it sustains, like I said.
So if I could ask you just sort of to forecast here what you think might be next. In
the Ukraine?
No, I'm sorry. In for the U.S. energy industry and U.S. Basically, how do you think this is a tipping point for the United States to invest and radically change our energy policy? Like, do you think that this is the impetus, or do you think this will be short-lived and then in a few weeks we'll just be back to the status quo?
I've been surprised, and I think a lot of people have been surprised. Maybe if you're an expert, you knew this coming. I've been amazed that shale oil has continued to sit on the sidelines for the most part. And what you overlook, I think you overlook the sheer logistics of getting something back online, the difficulty of it, but you also overlook the financial aspect of it, where they're being constrained by their shareholders and their investors saying, your first job, your first responsibility to us is to make money. It's not to go into debt to build, to do, drill more wells. So that's I don't know. I guess folks saw that coming, but in a crisis, I thought maybe that would be overrun pretty quickly, and it's not. The other thing is I think over time shale will run into more problems, and by that I mean already in the Permian and in certain parts of Texas, there's been local mandates and regulations against how much fluid and sand and water can be used. So that's an extra cost that's incurred. What we've seen coming out of COP26 at the end of last year is a significantly increased attention to the consequences of methane, which is a significant emission from shale oil. So I think a lot of these things are going to conspire to maybe put a top on what we thought might be endless potential with fracking. So I guess in answer to your question, I think we've got to move into other alternative energies and clean energies, because as I said, and this is what was stunning to me about this comment by John Hess, Chief Executive of Hess, who would know, saying we've got a sell-by date here. It may be 10 years, it may be 15 years. And to me, you're basically saying, look, shale is not going to get us a fuel on its own. We've got to start doing that now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, to think about the European markets. I mean, this was a big wake-up call for them. We're seeing Western European countries start to come up with some vague plans to get themselves off Russian energy. I mean, Germany obviously canceling the Nord Stream 2, or at least shelving the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. The UK saying that it will phase out imports from Russia. It's just I feel like there's a sea change happening there, but but here it's sort of hard to forecast. It involves sort of a sustained and patient approach to policy making that, is may be easy and have momentum now, but a few weeks or months from now, depending on how the situation goes, may be more difficult. Last thing I just want to add to this is these calls that are coming in from the United States, criticism of President Biden, for example, of not having warm enough relationships with Saudi Arabia or the UAE, such that those countries would step up and say, no, we're going to do whatever we can. We support this. It's very interesting to think about Saudi Arabia's role, and this is something we've talked about, and a point that you've made excellently on at least one other show. But Saudi Arabia, took a really hard decision in creating OPEC Plus in 2016 by including the Russians. And they did that in part because, the Russians really help set policy in the medium to long term. So for Saudi Arabia to just say, okay, yeah, you know what, we're going to cancel Russia and they're out, that, 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months from now, it's not an easy decision for them to do, because they've needed Russia to help act as one big coordinated body. So they don't want to throw that away and then have no, control over the market at all down the road because of, what's going on today. I don't know if you have a comment on that. It's just something that
I'd have two thoughts on that. One is Saudi Arabia, UAE, many of our traditional allies, including Israel, by the way, who has sort of tried to, dance around this and triangulate, all feel like it's a multipolar world now. It's not, the U.S. is not the hegemon. It's U.S., China, and Russia, and they feel like they have to hedge their bets. And that's their right, and there's probably an assessment that they make, and they're doing that, and it's become very clear in this situation. So, that's Saudi Arabia's calculus is very complex, just as is India's and Israel's and so many other countries. One of the great tragedies of this, I believe, so it's easy to criticize, say, Germany. I don't understand. Why did you give up nuclear energy? And now they're scrambling to possibly, although there won't be time to do it, but why did you commit so much in that relationship with Russia and in terms of your energy supplies and other countries in the region too? And part of it, I think, was aspirational. They wanted Russia to become part of the global community and a trusted member. And I think that's one of the tragedies of Putin's behavior is he's just, Russia can no longer be trusted, if it ever could be. But, under different leadership, you could have had a situation where Russia worked very closely on energy issues and other issues with Europe. And that Russia, in the course of that, Russia was engaged in the global economy and enriched itself as well as the rest of the world. Instead of this confrontational situation, and Ukraine might have been a buffer, if there'd have been, and I think people like Henry Kissinger and others always said it doesn't need to be one or the other, it can be a nice bridge. But Putin has blown all that up, and I think in terms of, say, the Saudis' calculus, it's troublesome because at the end of this, Russia Russia's not only dangerous right now, Putin's extremely dangerous right now, but whatever happens in the outcome, if we can avoid a nuclear war but Russia is going to be significantly reduced. And, its role as a counterweight to the U.S. Is going to be diminished. And I can honestly say, if this goes on and Russia is damaged as much as it might appear to be economically, it can end up being a satellite of China. That's a huge statement, but, and it never is quite going to be because of their military prowess, but they could be so weakened, so hobbled, their only benefactor is China.
Which the U.S. definitely does not in all of this as well.
What he's done is cataclysmic, and it's going to have consequences we can't foresee.
Yeah. Fascinating. Great one big thing, Richard. I almost don't even want to do mine now because it's not going to stack up to that.
Please get us back to normality. This was like I said, I didn't want to do this, but I felt like I really need to just try to look at it so I can understand it a little better.
Well, I'm glad you did, and I'm sure everybody watching is glad you did because I personally feel like I had a few questions answered by that. So if I feel that way, hopefully others do as well. But my one big thing this week, Richard, is a recent study by Uber in Saudi Arabia. And the headline from this study, we won't bury the lead here on the 966, and neither did Uber, is that female participation in the labor force in Saudi Arabia keeps climbing and is ahead of schedule for Vision 2030. And that's just awesome news. Really amazing, in fact. Between 2018 and 2021, female participation in the labor force grew from around 22% to almost 36%. The increase means that the country has met its Vision 2030 target of 30% female labor force participation almost 10 years ahead of schedule. But the study itself was commissioned to measure the 4-year impact of Uber's Wusul program, which was designed to promote female participation in the workplace in Saudi Arabia by providing government-subsidized Uber rides to and from work. This is sort of what also caught my attention. I didn't know this program was going on, but it's really cool. The number of women benefiting from Wusul increased from 300 to around 13,000 in only the first year of operation. And by late last year, 2021, more than 120,000 women had used Wusul to make more than 20 million trips to and from their workplaces, largely via the Uber app. It's a private-public collaboration, and it's Uber's largest subsidy program and one of Uber's largest government partnerships globally. More is available on this study online, which was actually done by the management consultancy Roland Berger. So it's a beautiful presentation. But I just thought that this was really cool. And, it's what struck me too about it. And again, I won't stand on this too long, but it's not just that Saudi Arabia has opened up to women and given women more opportunities and allowed women to drive. It's also actually taking steps to make that easier. If you're a woman and you're all of a sudden enabled to drive and get around, this is an opportunity to get a new job that is maybe far away, but you may not want to take that job if the commute is so long or is too expensive. And this is like a meaningful subsidy that actually has a socioeconomic impact. And I just think that's really cool. I tried to look and I couldn't find the statistic. So if anybody knows, send us a tweet or send us an email at the 966podcast.com. 966podcast@gmail.com. I don't know what percentage of Uber drivers in Saudi Arabia are women. That was not in this study, but just fascinating stuff here, and really cool that they have a program like this to make it easier for women to get their first job, to start going to work.
I think that you just hit the nail right on the head when you talked about the mechanics of change. And there's the aspiration to get women in the workplace, but then there's the real life. How do you get women there? How do people get a ride? And that sort of thing. And before my next comment, you said this is the largest public-private initiative that Uber has.
Yeah.
In the globe.
Globally, yeah.
See, that's remarkable. This is Saudi Arabia, freaking Saudi Arabia, and this is the scope of their ambition. But here's what I love. So that Wusul program is designed for women. There are women, when you got the right to drive in 2018 and you had a job, you could go out and buy a new car. There are plenty of families that could do that for their daughters or husbands for their wives or women for themselves. But this program is specifically for women who make less than $2,100 a month. So it's really, I think, again, it's the mechanics of change. You can't just legislate, now women, you're equally employed. How do we get there? And this is helping them do exactly that. And it's resulted in the extraordinary numbers you just said, already 36%, the 20 million rides. This is a resounding success, but it's also a testimony to thinking through how to make things happen and then acting to enable what is required to reach your goals. I just think it's a great story.
The other thing that I would add to that I think is really awesome and sort of emblematic of what Saudi Arabia is all about these days is that this isn't something where, you account for all your rides that you've taken over the month, you put it into a spreadsheet, you print it out, you mail it in slowly into the government, and then 6 months later you get a check for whatever. This is like a feature built into Uber's app that just takes off 80% of your ride. Presumably Uber then just automatically bills the government or shares the fee with the government. It's seamless, just like all these other innovations coming online in Saudi now that are not just new social tools. They're actually, tech driven and easy to use and user friendly, so that part of it is not an implement to using it. And that was really cool. And actually in this study, it's just it uses a lot of photos of the app and how, all of us have used Uber booking a ride. It's just you select Wasul and your fare is significantly reduced. So it's like all the stuff we talked about with Tawakana app and all that. It's just, it's amazing to see, really.
It's e-government that's working, and there's nothing more encouraging and confidence building when you see something like this.
Completely agreed. Okay, Richard, let's get to our awesome conversation with Dr. Mark Thompson, who will be joining us here from Riyadh. We're talking now with Dr. Mark Thompson, Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Socioeconomics Program at the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies, and author of the book, Being Young Male in Saudi, Identity, Politics, in a Globalized Kingdom. Mark, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Mark, we're just delighted to have you. We talk regularly on this podcast about economic issues, social issues, and it's wonderful to have someone who actually knows what they're talking about on. You've immersed yourself as head of socioeconomics program at the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies, which I think most of our listeners and viewers know is really a prestigious institution and well regarded. You've done a number of publications recently. You have Good Jobs and Bad Jobs, Employment Attitudes, Perceptions and Priorities in Saudi Arabia. You published a very interesting book called Being Young, Male in Saudi, Identity and Politics in a Globalized Kingdom. And you have an upcoming publication, Governance and Domestic Policymaking in Saudi Arabia, Transforming Society, Economics, Politics, and Culture. These are fascinating issues to us. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing at King Faisal and maybe expand on your methodology? Because I was listening to a video of you talking about all the surveys you did when you wrote the Being Young, Male in Saudi book. I'd love to understand what you're doing, what you're trying to get at, and how you're getting at it.
Well, actually, my research focus has remained the same, over many, many years. And that is that, I look at societal transformation. I look at the sort of the socioeconomic impact of what we've seen happening over the last couple of decades on young people in Saudi Arabia, because at the end of the day, this is a very young kingdom. This is a very young population. These things impact them. And when you are in conversation with young Saudis of either gender and no matter, all different parts of the kingdom, what they're concerned about, what they want to talk about, they don't really want to talk about the high policy types things, although, of course, at the moment, Ukraine, of course, but, in general, 95% of the time, they want to talk about jobs and they want to talk about careers. They want to talk about education. They want to talk about the pandemic. They want to talk about opportunities and all those sort of topics that fall into, what I often talk about as sort of the area of low politics, but actually those are the things that impact everybody, on people's everyday lives. So I've been looking at these issues for, many, many years, and thank you for mentioning those publications. I mean, those are only just sort of some of the more recent ones. And I've been in Saudi Arabia now since 2001. And I think, and I've worked for multiple institutions, not just the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies. I mean, I taught politics at King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals for 8 years. I was at the Saudi National Guard. I was at Prince Sultan University. I worked for IFRA, the Aramco project, and I actually started out first came to Saudi Arabia as a teacher for Saudi Arabian Airlines. So, King Fahd Day. So, I mean, and my PhD actually came about because of living in Saudi Arabia, not because I read something in a library, and so this is something that's been with me. This is my journey, if you like, ever since I arrived in the kingdom. And of course, you've mentioned the methodology. I mean, Saudi Arabia is one of the most, and always has been, regardless of the recent changes, Saudi Arabia has always been one of the most social societies on earth. I mean, you go to Raha, you go to the Majlis, you go to the Diwaniyah, you go out with your friends, you go to weddings, you do, it's an incredibly social society where personal connections, friendships, and these things really, really matter. So I have done work in the past, like, for example, my first book, where I did extensive one-to-one interviews with about 120 people all across the kingdom. And for sort of the more recent, I suppose from about sort of 10 years ago, the sort of work that, or longer than that actually, that I've done sort of with youth. Yes, I do use surveys from time to time, written surveys in Arabic, but actually I only use those to support my main methodology, which is either one-to-one interviews or, more often than not, focus groups. So, for example, being young male in Saudi, I did 55 focus groups all over the kingdom with people from, all walks of life, all constituencies. And my focus, when I do my focus groups, I don't do them in an academic focus group setting. I go to them, we sit in the istiraha, we go to the desert, we sit on the beach, we sit in the park, we sit in the coffee shop, wherever they would normally be. And actually having the sort of conversations that they would normally be having anyway. Yes. So I don't record. I never record anything because that automatically changes the dynamic, So I just take copious notes from these focus groups, and I end up with 90,000 words of notes from 50 focus groups, which of course turned into the book. So I understand that it's really, it's so important to have these personal connections, to sit and talk to people, because actually that's actually how people are saying the same thing. It's not what happens in the workshop, it's what, over coffee, over lunch.
Right.
Yeah. So, it's really nice to be back. Although it's not like this as well, of course.
Well, this has been quite a tool, and it's been a wonderful thing, especially for our purposes, because we want to get we want it to be a platform for Saudi and non-Saudi experts, but we really want it to be a platform for folks who are in Saudi, and as we move along, more and more younger people. Yeah,
great. Well, I can do with that if you need any assistance with finding younger people, younger Saudis who'll be willing to. I know so many. So
yes, an emphatic yes, because I've been I've been dealing with Saudi Arabia for 30 years, and I've worked with private sector groups, and we continue to work with a private sector group that's associated with the Federation of Saudi Chambers, and there is nothing more compelling than a Saudi speaking about themselves in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. No, this is really, and one of the things I try and do with my work, my papers, my books and things is to actually, sort of be a conduit, as it were, for these voices, to voices that otherwise don't get heard because they're not elites, because, they didn't get a PhD from Harvard, or because they left school and went straight into employment. But their voices are as important as anybody else's, and my work, that's what I try and do with my work.
Agreed. And let me just forewarn you right now, because I want to be polite. One of the first emails, communications after we're done with this, is me coming to you and saying, Mark, yes, who would you recommend we get in touch with to talk to?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, there's a lot of very interesting people who are not on the list, if you know what I mean, because but they're young, they're up and coming, they're starting to mark in their own particular sectors or their fields, and incredibly interesting people, and so no, I can definitely give you quite a lot of names of people.
Excellent.
Male and female, of course.
That's it. Yeah, that's even better. And that's one of this format we found, and we've been hacking away at the relationship for a long time, and we have a well-respected newsletter. But moving into this format, we found a real thirst for it. I mean, what we're doing is fairly unique. It's informal, but it's informed, and we drawing from a lot of different expertise. So there's nothing else out there really like that, and we want to keep going with sharing voices, just like you said.
Yes.
Otherwise, wouldn't be heard.
No, exactly, and I think this is the silver lining to the pandemic in a way, is that we have, like us at the center, we at the number of events and the number of lectures and seminars and whatever that we do is increased exponentially, because we've moved a lot of online, and we're keeping it online. Of course, we're back in person, but we're also keeping this other side that we were sort of forced to do because of the pandemic.
And there's very few. Saudi Arabia is a very welcoming in-person culture. Yes. So it's very interesting to see. I'm sure everybody there is racing to just get back and hang out with each other.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, fortunately, the pandemic did not affect Saudi Arabia as badly as many other places. Of course, the government, their government response to the pandemic was very, very good. The tech is fantastic, and the government messaging was very clear. As somebody who comes from a country where there was no government messaging, I mean, hello.
Yeah, exactly. We regularly express our envy.
Well, no, I mean, this is, there is no doubt, that there is no doubt that they handled this extremely well. But then, of course, they had coronavirus in 2012 and 2015 with MERS, and also, extremely importantly, they have Hajj every year. And every year, the Ministry of Health and everybody are constantly monitoring who's coming in from where. I remember when Ebola was the big problem, in West. And the authorities here were so concerned that something could come in at Hajj, So because of that awareness, and I think that awareness was so important, they realized, very early on that, wait, this is serious, and we have to deal with that seriously.
It was Saudi Arabia is uniquely well positioned. I mean, when you look at and Lucian and I have talked about this on previous episodes, when you look at some of the components that were necessary to successfully deal with the pandemic, it's helpful to have an authoritarian government. It's helpful to have the means, financial means. It's really helpful to have that, just as you say, that experience and the habit of following the science.
Yes.
And it's also they were very disciplined and rigorous, and they stuck it through. So I mean, they really brought everything you could possibly bring.
We're very lucky to have a very competent Minister of Health when it started.
Right.
It was a competent minister, had been a minister in other portfolios, who is highly respected within Saudi society and across the Saudi society, who also knows how to communicate, which I think.
We know Dr. Tawfiq from when he was Minister of Commerce, and he's a capable guy.
He is, and he's a very approachable person, and he's a very straightforward person as well. Yeah. So I think, to have somebody like him in that position was really important. And the fact that, the king basically said to him, whatever you want, was and what's I think what really said it all was that the first person to be vaccinated live on television, on social media, and all of those things was not the king, was not the crown prince. It was Dr. Tawfiq.
There you go.
Yes, that's what I mean. They got the messaging right here, they got the tech right. And I think that even though people grumbled about certainly the curfew in 2020, which was, of course, as you know, was extremely strict, and even though people grumbled about it at the time, in retrospect, of course, there's a huge realization that actually, that really was the right thing to do.
We're hoping to have, we've already got him as a spokesperson and sort of the head researcher over at the Saudi Data and AI Agency, who developed Tawakkalna.
Excellent.
And to talk about that, because as you say, I mean, this is one of the benefits that came along. It's something that's like Abshur. It's like everyday life for a Saudi or for anybody there.
Tawakkalna, of course, now has a completely different role from just being, a coronavirus COVID application. Now you have your Igama, your driving license, everything is on Tawakkalna now.
Right.
And the majority of people actually are saying, well, this is great because actually it just makes life so much easier for everyone.
Replaces the wallet and
yeah. Seriously.
I think Mada payment scheme is the next thing to go on.
Nice.
So I heard yesterday.
Well,
yes.
Let me cut in here, guys. I'm just going to do a quick introduction to you, Mark, and then we'll just jump right back into the conversation because this is all good. And we want to include as much of it as we can. And then, so the way this will work is I'll just do a short introduction, and then Richard's going to follow up to it, and then we can just talk. And it's a podcast, so whatever comes out will be what we use. So we'll just go with that. Great. Richard, and you're ready and recording on your side as well?
I am recording.
Okay, cool. We're talking now with Dr. Mark Thompson, Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Socioeconomics Program at the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies, and author of the book, Being Young Male in Saudi, Identity, Politics, in a Globalized Kingdom. Mark, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Mark, we're just delighted to have you. We talk regularly on this podcast about economic issues, social issues, and it's wonderful to have someone who actually knows what they're talking about on. I mean, you've immersed yourself as head of socioeconomics program at the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies, which I think most of our listeners and viewers know is really a prestigious institution and well regarded. You've done a number of publications recently. You have Good Jobs and Bad Jobs, Employment Attitudes, Perceptions and Priorities in Saudi Arabia. You published a very interesting book called Being Young, Male in Saudi, Identity and Politics in a Globalized Kingdom. And you have an upcoming publication, Governance and Domestic Policymaking in Saudi Arabia, Transforming Society, Economics, Politics, and Culture. These are fascinating issues to us. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing at King Faisal and maybe expand on your methodology? Because I was listening to a video of you talking about all the surveys you did when you wrote the Being Young, Male in Saudi book. I'd love to understand what you're doing, what you're trying to get at, and how you're getting at it.
Well, actually, my research focus has remained the same, over many, many years. And that is that, I look at societal transformation. I look at the sort of the socioeconomic impact of what we've seen happening over the last couple of decades on young people in Saudi Arabia, because at the end of the day, this is a very young kingdom. This is a very young population. These things impact them. And when you are in conversation with young Saudis of either gender and no matter, all different parts of the kingdom, what they're concerned about, what they want to talk about, they don't really want to talk about the high policy types things, although of course at the moment Ukraine, of course, but in general, 95% of the time they want to talk about jobs, and they want to talk about careers, they want to talk about education, they want to talk about the pandemic, they want to talk about opportunities, and all those sort of topics that fall into, what I often talk about as sort of the area of low politics, but actually those are the things that impact everybody, on people's everyday lives. So I've been looking at these issues for, many, many years, and thank you for mentioning those publications. I mean, those are only just sort of some of the more recent ones. And I've been in Saudi Arabia now since 2001. And I think, and I've worked for multiple institutions, not just the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies. I mean, I taught politics at King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals for 8 years. I was at the Saudi National Guard. I was at Prince Sultan University. I worked for IFRA, the Aramco project, and I actually started out in my first came to Saudi Arabia as a teacher for Saudi Arabian Airlines. So, King Fahd Day. So, I mean, and my PhD actually came about because of living in Saudi Arabia, not because I read something in a library, and so this is something that's been with me. This is my journey, if you like, ever since I arrived in the kingdom, and of course. You've mentioned the methodology. I mean, Saudi Arabia is one of the most, and always has been, regardless of the recent changes. Saudi Arabia has always been one of the most social societies on earth. I mean, you go to Raha, you go to the Majlis, you go to the Diwaniya, you go out with your friends, you go to weddings. You do, it's an incredibly social society where personal connections, friendships, and these things really, really matter. So. I have done work in the past, like, for example, my first book where I did extensive one-to-one interviews with about 120 people all across the kingdom. And for sort of the more recent, I suppose from about sort of 10 years ago, the sort of work that, or no longer than that actually, that I've done sort of with youth. Yes, I do use surveys from time to time, written surveys in Arabic, but actually I only use those to support my main methodology, which is either one-to-one interviews or more often than not focus groups. So, for example, being young male in Saudi, I did 55 focus groups all over the kingdom with people from, all walks of life, all constituencies. And my focus, when I do my focus groups, I don't do them in an academic focus group setting. I go to them, we sit in the istiraha, we go to the desert, we sit on the beach, we sit in the park, we sit in the coffee shop, wherever they would normally be. And actually having the sort of conversations that they would normally be having anyway. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I don't record. I never record anything because that automatically changes the dynamic, so I just take copious notes from these focus groups, and I end up with 90,000 words of notes from 50 focus groups, which of course turned into the book. So, I understand that it's really, it's so important to have these personal connections, to sit and talk to people, because actually that's actually how people are much more comfortable. And in a focus group, having these very informal discussion focus groups, it allows for disagreement, it allows for contradictions, it allows for nuance, it allows for gray areas to emerge, because we here in Saudi Arabia are in the midst of this transition at the moment. It's still ongoing, and transitions by their very nature are messy and uneven, and they go forward, they go backwards, or here being Saudi Arabia, they go sideways, they go diagonally, whatever. And you can't put things into sort of neat little boxes and say, this is this and this is this. There are complexities, there are contradictions, there is this nuance and everything. And to get to try and capture that, you need to sit to talk to people. You need to understand what their perceptions are, what their concerns are, what their aspirations are, what maybe they don't understand as well, maybe what they haven't even thought about sometimes. And you can only really do that, I find, here in the kingdom in those sort of informal settings. I think when it comes to methodology, research methodology, you don't try and force your research methodology onto a particular group or a particular context. Rather, you adapt yourself to the context that you're operating in. And, that's how, that's what I do. And that's how I get the results that I get a lot of the time. And if I, as I say, if I do something like a survey, I simply do that as a way of supporting what my qualitative research is telling me.
Mm-hmm. I've always been fascinated by Saudi Arabia because of this sort of one-of-a-kind, extraordinary experiment of trying to transition from traditional to modern while remaining authentic and retaining important traditions that people feel strongly about and want to continue. So even without Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia would be fascinating.
Yes.
But now you have this overlay of the King Salman and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have brought into play beginning in April 2016. That we've watched from day one, even before it came in. We remember the McKinsey reports coming out in late December 2015, this is what's coming and that sort of thing. And we've seen it build momentum. We've seen skepticism. We've seen where we now to a point where we've seen real change, fundamental transformation at the granular level. And as you say, affecting no demographic more than youth. What are you seeing? I think this is something that really infuses your work, is that the Vision 2030 and youth.
Well, I mean, Vision 2030 was in many ways a response to what was already happening bottom up. I mean, the changes were already ongoing. And a lot of the catalyst for that, of course, was in particular the 2014 oil crash, which had enormous impact on, for example, the employment market in Saudi Arabia. So I used to work at, King Faisal University of Petroleum and Minerals at that time, pre-2014. The graduates who, of course, are best in the kingdom, they were getting, 6-7 job offers, and then that happened and that went to none overnight almost. And that changed, that started to change the mentalities and started to change the conversation and the discourse. And also in terms of, the entertainment side and what have you. I mean, as you know, there was nothing before or hardly anything. But of course, young people being young people and lots of very smart, entrepreneurial, aspirational young people like the kingdom has, they were sort of starting, they were making their own things up. They were looking at what was officially there and saying, well, they're not doing anything for us, so we'll just go ahead and do it ourselves. And that's what they were doing. So, I could see that, the combination of those two things was at some point going to have to force something somewhere. So long time before Vision 2030, I remember saying to somebody very high up, he was telling me that, there were going to be these programs, because I was asking him about, he said to me, what are the 3 most important things in Saudi Arabia, in your opinion? And I said, that's easy, youth. And, he said, oh, but we've got this program, we've got this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And I said, I had to stop him. And I said, look, it's as though we're on a train station at the moment. And the train that you're talking about, youth, has gone. It's gone, and it's up to you to catch up with them, not the other way around, No. And then you add to that, of course, the 2009 sort of social media revolution and how that, the fact that, young Saudis are, online 24/7, as you know, with 3-4 smartphones and what have you. So all of this is sort of building pressure, if you like. And so, Vision 2030 was sort of replying to this, was responding to this. And you knew that something like that had to happen. So when I was in Riyadh at the time, watching when His Royal Highness made the announcement in April 2016, sitting with young Saudis, of course, to see how they responded to it. And of course, they were incredibly excited because all of a sudden, somebody was actually talking to them about what they wanted to hear, and somebody, who wasn't 80, which was a huge change. And I think in terms of the vision, I mean, there's a lot, as you said, there's been a lot of skepticism and there's been a lot of criticism and what have you. And, I frequently, if I'm outside the kingdom, I have people talking to me about this, and they will say to me, well, what about this program? Do you think it's going to succeed? And what about this? Is it going to succeed? And is this part of the vision going to succeed, et cetera, et cetera? And, my response to them is that actually you've got the wrong end of the stick here, because what you're talking about are specific National Transformation Program projects. You're not talking about the vision. The vision is precisely that, a vision, and it's intangible, yes? And therefore, if you look at Saudi Arabia today and you ask yourself, has the vision succeeded? The answer is yes, it has already succeeded, because it's changed this. It's changed the way that young people think. It's changed the way that young people see their futures, how they see opportunities, how they see careers, how they see that living their lives. I mean, and that's just an enormous change. I mean, I was with some of the students I taught at King Fahd University of Petroleum a couple of months ago, and I keep up with hundreds and hundreds of my former students, and a lot of them are in Riyadh, of course, now. And we were talking about when I taught them in 2013, and they were saying to me, yes, back then, our lives were pretty much set. It was, graduate, join Aramco, retire, die, and, and whilst that's there's a joke, there's a lot of truth in that,
especially coming out of KFUPM,
yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. Whereas now, there's so many other opportunities. There's so many different types of things they can do. I mean, every single young Saudi I know seems to have some sort of startup, whether it's a coffee shop, whether it's selling something online, along with their full-time job, whether it's a juice bar, I don't know. I mean, and this is a huge, huge change. And talk with this same group of students as well, who I met, who now work for STC and PIF and all of these places. And, I said to them, when you studied with me in 2013, we had 3 classes of, 45 students, whatever. And I said, then in 2013, out of those 3 classes, the 120 odd students, how many students either had a part-time job or volunteered? And they said, well, probably nobody. 1, 2, maybe. I said, well, today, if you looked at that sort of same number, how many would have a part-time job or volunteer? 70%, 80%? That's a massive change in attitudes and mentality. And and a part-time job might just be working as a Kareem driver for a couple of hours, or whatever. But this is what we've seen happen. And in a society where, as I said, the very sort of a community society where people are, always in groups and always talking, then obviously, you used to get sort of Ahmed and Abdullah sort of saying, oh, well, we've just started a food truck, or we've just started volunteering at MISC, or, we're doing this, or what have you. And of course, then the others in the group say, oh, yeah, that sounds like fun. Why don't we do that? And of course, that not just sounds like fun, but it also sounds like a good opportunity to, meet certain people that we wouldn't have otherwise. Anyone, Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the mentalities have changed. The ways of thinking about things have changed. And I think particularly when you're looking at the sort of the socio-economic sphere, the huge changes that have happened there in terms of how people think about employment, how people think about careers, sociocultural, I think, is quite different at times. But yes, I mean, it's been something of a revolution, actually. And, I work now at King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies. We have lots of very bright young female researchers, junior researchers who I work with on a daily basis, who come to my office for advice and things like this. And, there was a time when I would have been arrested if that had happened.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey.
So, the first 7 years I was here, I never spoke to a Saudi woman. So, these are really huge changes, seismic changes, but these are really positive changes. And I remember last Ramadan, when the Crown Prince gave his interview, on Ratana in Arabic. It was at 11 p.m. in the evening, which of course was perfect time in Ramadan.
Exactly.
And very interesting because on Takht Street, all the coffee shops were rammed full of people, and the football was on, and then they turned it over to watch the Crown Prince give his interview. And of course, it was fascinating because he talked about, predominantly about the cost of living and employment, VAT, and these sort of low political things. But I actually went to my office because our junior researchers because it was Ramadan, they were working in the evenings rather than the day. And one of the female junior researchers came into my office and said, "Oh, Dr. Mark, are you in for the whole evening?" And I said, "No, unfortunately, I'm actually off to get a vaccination this evening." But she said, we, meaning the young female employees, whether they work in public relations, whether they're researchers or what have you, had arranged to sort of have a sort of mini party in one of the meeting rooms to watch the Crown Prince's interview. And I thought, there you go. There's There's your vision.
Just extraordinary. And to thank you, Mark. I mean, that's really exciting to hear someone who's witnessing this firsthand and paying such close attention. I agree with you, and we often refer to November 2014 and that OPEC meeting when essentially Saudi Arabia, it became very clear that Saudi Arabia had to change its course. And but as you say, it was being pulled along by forces already in train. And but let me get you mentioned something, and maybe if you can untangle a little bit. You said the difference between socioeconomic and sociocultural.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that I think Saudi Arabia's core identity narrative, in other words, Islam and family, are still right at the center of life in the kingdom, are still essentially what it means to be somebody from this country. And to what extent since 2016, since the launch of the vision, have we seen sort of fundamental change there? Well, I don't think we have. I think those have remained constant, and when I say Islam here, I'm talking not about religion, I'm talking about faith. I'm talking about people's faith, their relationship with Allah, with God, with Islam, and has that changed? No. Has the role of the family fundamentally changed? No, I don't think so. I certainly don't see it in my daily life. Unless I'm traveling with Saudi friends on a Friday, maybe we're going on a trip or something, I never see any Saudi friend ever between 11 a.m. and 4 or 5 p.m. on a Friday. Never. Because you don't do that. So I think, there are those fundamental core identity narratives within that sort of sociocultural identity realm that remain constant, whereas a lot of the socioeconomic changes, we're seeing rapid changes and huge changes, and like I said, changes that I never envisaged seeing. And I think sometimes we have to sort of maybe differentiate between where things are happening.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're Saudi Brain Trust, you're the Al Saud, and you're the government, isn't that exactly the balance you want to achieve?
Yes, of course it is. I mean, and this is very important because it's incredibly important. You've got to, you need to maintain what it is that makes the kingdom. You need to maintain, and because this is also incredibly important to individuals, to families, to tribes, to regions, whatever. Yes, absolutely. People talk about, when they talk about Riyadh season, and they sort of talk about Boulevard or sort of those types of Riyadh season events, if you like. You don't get as many people talking about Zaman Village, yes, and yet Zaman, the heritage part, and yet on the several times that I went there, it was packed, absolutely packed, for poetry recitals, for traditional music and things like this. And that's the same with similar events that I've been to all around the kingdom, I went to the Uneza Spring Flower Festival, for example. And, I think it is very important because you also want to make sure that that these things are compatible with, people's own sense of their identity, of who they are, and compatible with people's heritage, with people's understanding of themselves. Very, very important.
A little sidebar, we covered Founding Day and the origins of Founding Day, the philosophy behind Founding Day, and the actual implementation of Founding Day. But a little sidebar, one of the interesting things was it really looked like in the celebrations, people really enjoyed coming out in traditional garb. There was a whole array. It was like a fashion show of women and men dressed as their great grandparents were dressed.
Yeah. And my WhatsApp was just going crazy all day long with everybody sending me photographs of themselves dressed up. This is me and my family. And, talking about having a party today where we're all dressing up, all 350 of us, and yes, no, very much. And I think what was fascinating about that as well was it was an opportunity that so many people seem to enjoy, to celebrate, not just, to celebrate their family history, their tribal history, their origins, and hence the costumes and things like that. And, people at Boulevard dressed as, flower men from Jizan and everything.
Right.
I thought it was great. I thought it was lovely. And because, I think when people talk about Saudi Arabia outside the kingdom, or when Saudi Arabia is, discussed, it tends to be discussed in a very sort of general way. It tends to be treated as though it's this one huge homogenous society. And, people talk about Saudi women, as though they're one great big group that goes everywhere together, and yet actually, this is a very, very diverse kingdom, in terms of its population, in terms of, the geography, in terms of the heritage. And of course, there are things that connect everybody, but you also have, these wonderful, sort of individual, sort of cultural heritages around the kingdom. And I think, celebrating that is lovely, and it's very important. And Founding Day, from that point of view, was very interesting because it actually highlighted some of this as well, which was very enjoyable. And it was nice to see that it was, that it was not just celebrated here, but it was noticed as well outside the kingdom.
Well, we found it as I said, Saudi Arabia is a constant fascination. It's an ongoing experiment, and it was just. It's so interesting in terms of establishing a national myth, and this is not a derogatory thing, but a narrative for a country. And you see, as you say constantly, you said it's a young country, even though it has origins going way back. But it is a young country. But introducing and reinforcing this narrative, which substantiates going forward as well what Saudi Arabia wants to see changed and what they want to achieve. Let me. Mark, if I can just go off on a little tangent, one of the things, speaking to perceptions from the West, you're exactly right. And this one of our purposes of this show is to try and unpack things and introduce a little nuance and context, because it's almost like a reaction. People in the West don't want anything nuanced. They want it. NEOM is this, and oil policy is this, and so on and so forth. But I see this a little bit, this recent interview that the Crown Prince did with The Atlantic, and I see the titles about what it was. But if you read the transcript of the whole interview, it's quite fascinating. And part of that discussion is something that I think is important going on in Saudi Arabia, and speaks to what you're talking about, the faith and Saudi's commitment to maintaining these traditions and how they feel about their faith. But his discussion about what they want to see in terms of reorienting in terms of Islam, not a moderate Islam. He said, do not use that term, but the type of Islam that prevailed in Saudi Arabia traditionally. And does this resonate with Saudi youth?
Yes, of course it does. It resonates in terms of, as I say, I always used to teach my students, the difference between religion and faith. The fact that religion is the sort of the political side, if you like. So I always used to teach them that. And of course, Saudi Arabia is without a doubt, in my opinion, a much happier place today in general, in terms of when you go out, because you don't have this sort of worry about having to look over your shoulder all the time as you used to have to in the past. Right. You're not sort of being, you haven't got people sort of hectoring you about, you've got to go and pray, you've got to do this or what have you, which of course people resented, because it's like you don't need to tell me to go and do that, because it's something that I do anyway. Yes, so no, people, I think that sort of that pressure that was taken away was definitely welcomed, but again, it hasn't altered people's own faith, because that's been constant. Throughout the time that I'm been here, and it's constant with all the friends that I'm with, all my Saudi friends. So no, I mean, I think that is something that people feel, is an improvement, because it's sort of made the situation sort of more relaxed, and it sort of means that you haven't got that sort of as I say, people looking over your shoulder, as it were.
Right. Lucian, I don't want to preempt you, because we were talking about questions beforehand, and Lucian made this very good point about the then King Abdullah scholarships, now custodian of the two holy mosques. And should I go ahead, Lucian? Or
yeah, go ahead.
And we've always commented when this was introduced in 2005, and we've worked with the Saudi Cultural Mission here, and we sort of have followed the program. We've always commented it is one of the most creative and subversive programs, ever introduced by a country. Bringing this hundreds of thousands of students both to the U.S. and elsewhere across the globe, and having them study and learn and create affinities in Western countries, and then come back to Saudi Arabia. Just an extraordinary experiment, extraordinary initiative. Have you seen the same thing?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. So I remember going to a seminar in London many years ago. I think it was when King Abdullah was in London for the G20, and the then British ambassador to Saudi Arabia was there, along with all the past British ambassadors to Saudi Arabia. And there was talking obviously about the King Abdullah Scholarship Program, and the point was made then that, of course, in Saudi Arabia at that time, you had the top, you had the bottom, but you didn't really have any sort of intermediate stratum. It was non-existent. Well, it exists today, and many people, over the years would sort of talk to me about the King Abdullah Scholarship Program, sort of say, well, what's happening? Is anything happening? Whatever. And I always used to say to them, wait.
Yes.
These people have got to graduate, they've got to return. And of course, the fascinating thing about this is that the vast majority of them all do come back, and always have done. And then they have to start feeding into the system, and then start sort of rising up through the system. Well, this is happening. Now, when I first started at KFUPM, there were not many Saudi assistant professors. There are tons now. And it's the same at King Saud or whatever university you go to. You go to the ministries. I sometimes go to some of these major ministries, and I'm walking around the building thinking, well, I must be the oldest person here. So, the fact that also 50% are women as well, and so they, and now, the fact that so many of these people are now in decision-making positions, not just in public sector, obviously, but also in the private sector as well. Yes, it's been in my opinion, it's been a huge success, because it created that intermediate stratum, and it created, a whole generation or a couple of generations of Saudis who the government has been able to benefit from. Because at the end of the day, I've always said this, Saudi Arabia's greatest asset is not oil, it's its people. It's its young people. Think about, how much would Japan like to have Saudi Arabia's population, or some of the European countries? Well, exactly. Exactly. So, and I think we have to point out as well, that it wasn't just the King Abdullah Scholarship Program. It was also the money that was spent on, sort of the domestic education,
right,
as the Princess Nora University, KAUST, places like KFUPM, vocational colleges, what have you, the enormous expenditure on education right across the board. Of course, again, it's been uneven, and we can debate about what educational reforms have worked, and whether the ongoing reforms are successful or not, because it's always been a very contentious topic. But without a doubt, the combination of this has created this young, aspirational, by and large, well-educated population. It's extraordinary. I taught for 30 years, not just here, but in many other countries around the world, and the best students I ever had were the students at King Fahd University of Petroleum, and I had thousands of them, and they were, 10% of them were exceptional, and are now in quite major decision-making positions, a lot of them. So the country had and has so much potential, and so King Abdullah was, he was absolutely right to realize that you had to tap into this potential. You have to, give it direction. You have to. It was extremely successful.
Well, maybe this doesn't. We can't go back this far, but when we cover all the economic diversification efforts, and when you talk about Lucid, creating a manufacturing plant in King Abdullah Economic City, you talk about growing the military industrial base. Talk about 200,000 jobs from mining and minerals and that sort of thing. These are prospective jobs for Saudis primarily. And this is maybe where your admonitions, they say, wait, comes into place. Has the educational system, I'm talking not at KFUPM level, which is the high flyers.
Yes.
But K through 12 and maybe vocational, has that, how long will it take for that to start turning out really capable and employable young Saudis?
It already is. And I know this from a fact from, various companies that I've talked to for many, many years, who will tell you, for example, who employ technicians and things like this, who would tell you, 10, 15 years ago, they wouldn't dream of employing Saudi technicians. And now they say our best technicians are young Saudis, So it's already happening. Of course, there is still a long way to go, because you simply cannot do these things overnight. They do take time. You have to change the way people think. You have to change people's, attitudes to employment, the types of jobs that Saudis were willing to do and things like that, because we went through that period where, it was always, oh no, Saudis don't do certain jobs, but that's changing very much. So no, I do, there are a lot of challenges. There are going to be bumps in the roads, and there are going to be obstacles, but by and large, I think they can be overcome. And I think sometimes it does. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, whenever you look at these problems, when you look at these challenges, you sort of then start stepping back, then yes, it goes back to education, without a doubt. And I think a lot of the it's no good introducing this in tertiary education. It needs to come much, much further in advance.
Right.
And of course, one of the problems that they've had in Saudi Arabia for a long time, which is acknowledged and discussed, is the fact that all of these students would sort of, go through the education system, and then those that were going to go into tertiary education, male and female, would end up spending a year in orientation before they actually started their university program, because they had to do the orientation, because they wouldn't be, they didn't do it, they wouldn't actually be ready to go into university. And of course, that's ridiculous. And that's been, that's acknowledged here, within the education ministry and everything, that's ridiculous. You can't have that anymore. And the orientation programs and things like that need to become things of the past. There's no doubt that a great many challenges remain. But, I think going back to what you just said about the introduction of the King Abdullah Scholarship Program, or what I just said about going to that seminar in 2008, and then if you map how things have changed since then to now, I mean, it's actually an enormous change in really a relatively short space of time.
I'm always stunned and amazed when people try and use the metric of, so for example, well, the Aramco IPO didn't reach $2 trillion. It wasn't a success. There's no bearing on what exactly that was about.
No.
Same thing, just as you referred earlier, the transitions, they do have all these metrics, all these KPIs, all this sort of thing, and it's very aspirational, but that's not the point.
No.
And I think you captured it brilliantly when you talked about, what it's done to us, the Saudi mind.
And 2030 is not the point.
Right.
20 is just a date. And it's just a date and a branding. That's what it is. It's branding. But this isn't going to suddenly all stop in 2030. And not everything, and I think, not everything's going to succeed, and some things will succeed spectacularly well, some things maybe moderately, some things won't. But, I've heard, again, I remember going to the Miss Global Forum a couple of years ago, where there were several ministers there who were sort of having a sort of conversation between themselves in the audience and on the stage about all of this, which was fascinating. And it was really interesting to hear them say, actually, we understand that some of this is trial and error, because we haven't actually done this before, and so therefore not everything is going to go right necessarily, because a lot of it's new.
We're huge fans of Dr. Majid Al-Kassabi, who's the Minister of Commerce and also acting Minister of Media, but in general, just an all-round tremendous individual. But
he's just having that conversation.
I'm not surprised at all. He came and visited, I don't know, this was probably 2017, 2018 or whatever, and he was over speaking at the Center for Strategic International Studies, and we had helped arrange that. And it was so refreshing and so necessary, saying, look, this isn't a straight line. This is two steps up and one step back. And I think people need to understand that. So, Dr. Majid has always been very straightforward about that. That's because that's the kind of guy he is.
Yeah. This Saudi Arabia, 2 steps forward, 2 steps sideways.
and by the way, it makes perfect sense to everybody why.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, as I said, this is the nature of a transition, and you're going to, it's because you're dealing with people, so things are going to be uneven, and things are going to, be different, and maybe not work out the way that you necessarily think they are. I mean, I was talking to some sort of quite senior policymakers not that long ago, and I said, I think sometimes what people forget, and maybe they should be thinking about it a little bit more, is that policies can be formulated and they can be implemented, and actually it might be a very good policy, it might be something that's very beneficial, but it doesn't mean that societies or communities in the kingdom necessarily interpret them the way they were meant to be interpreted. And that's something that we sort of see happening as well, where, various groups of people in the kingdom say, oh yeah, this is great, and we're going to do this, but it's not necessarily what was planned.
As I've always said, it's an experiment, and it gets messy, but
exactly, it is an experiment, and experiments are always messy, and I think as well, when you have so much happening on so many different levels simultaneously, that it is difficult sometimes to keep track of what's going on, but it necessarily, that's going to happen. And we're all quite glad actually that Ramadan is coming up in a couple of weeks' time, because it's sort of going to be sort of an opportunity to just sort of let everything settle for a little while.
And it'll be the first normal Ramadan in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, last Ramadan was reasonably normal. But yes, so I think everybody's sort of looking forward to that. And obviously, like everywhere in the world, I mean, everybody's obviously very relieved that we seem to be sort of transitioning out of the worst of COVID. a great relief for everybody everywhere.
Yes. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Mark, I've got a question. So I think one thing that is difficult for us here in the United States, around the world, people looking at Saudi Arabia from the outside, is the lack of public polling. And it's just, there just really isn't a lot of it. But you are doing it really in a focused way. I mean, with focus groups, you're talking to young Saudis all the time. And you've probably talked to hundreds for your previous book, and you're a professor.
Thousands. Yes.
Is there thousands? Is there something that you can take when you talk to these young Saudis, one overarching thing that they want, that they agree on, that they all sort of see as important for their future?
Yes, to be engaged, to be consulted, to be able to participate. They have opinions, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you are a KFUPM chemical engineering graduate, or whether you're a Toyota car salesman in Oneza, or whether you are just a National Guard soldier somewhere. They have opinions, and they want to be listened to, and they want to feel that they matter. And they want to feel that they can be engaged. And people often ask me, what is the biggest change that I've seen since I first came in January 2001? And that's an easy question to answer. It's the desire to engage. It's huge. And so and I think, and that's obviously, that plays very much to my benefit, because with the type of research that I'm doing, which is very focused on young people and the socioeconomic issues that affect young people, what have you. So I find it very easy to do the type of research that I do, because they want to talk about it. They want to sit down and have these conversations. And in fact, I have these conversations daily with the young people I work with, or certainly several times a week when we go out for dinner with various people. And and we're having these conversations all the time, which of course is also very healthy in my opinion, and it's very encouraging to see that there is a lot of optimism amongst these young people. There is a lot of desire to engage, to participate, to contribute, whether that's to their own personal development, or to their, for the benefit of their family, or whether their community, or on a larger scale, the country, or the company they're working for. That's something that's very positive. But I think that there is an issue that's very important, that's linked to this, and there is at times a lack of mentoring, which is actually very, very necessary. I mean, one thing I noticed with the large numbers of young people that I've engaged with over years is that many of them, the majority of them, I would say, want to be mentored, even though they don't know they do, because they're 18, 19, 21. So I think that that's something that's lacking still to a certain degree, that needs to be improved. And the other thing linked to that needs to be improved is career guidance, which is a lot of the time is non-existent. So it's not it's not necessarily that young Saudis don't want to do that job. It's they don't even know that job exists. Mm-hmm. And nobody's ever told them about working in this sector or that sector, or what that could be. So I think, going back to the education question we were just talking about before, I think, this is something that needs to be incorporated, again, not in tertiary education, but in secondary education, which is more mentoring, more career guidance, a lot more information about the jobs of the future, what is going to be available, not now, but what is going to be available in a decade or something like this. And I think that's critical, given again the demographics. But the desire to engage is there, and it's exciting, and it's positive, and it's great fun as well.
It's fascinating to hear those descriptions. Because the rest of the world looks at Saudis sort of as an otherness, a strangeness, inaccessibility. And then when you talk about their youth being, seeking to be engaged and consulted and participate, have their opinions, and then the very, very familiar needing mentoring, but not quite really knowing how to get it. They sound like kids, youth all over the world.
Well, if you read the introduction to Being Young Male in Saudi, one of the things I stress in the introduction is that these young men's concerns are no different from young men's concerns all over the world. Getting a job, having enough money to buy a house, to get married, things like this. It's universal. A lot of these things are universal, and I think it's very, of course, the context is different, of course, but I think it's very important to get that message across, to sort of try and get rid of this, as you say, this sort of otherness, the sort of, Saudi Arabia, this very strange place over there. But at the end of the day, the kingdom is an incredibly important country, where it's located, the home of Islam, leader of the Arab world, all of these types of things, and however you look at it, it's an incredibly important country that, in my opinion, is only going to get more important into the future. And yet, I talk to a lot of policymakers, say, for example, if I'm back in the United Kingdom, I might be talking to a lot of policymakers, and they know more about Belgium than they do about Saudi Arabia. No offense to Belgium, but they do. But actually, you need to know more about this very dynamic country.
Mark, you've offended Belgium, which is actually a very important EU country. I tend to offend Ghana for whatever reason. I don't know why, because I always say, there's a reason we talk about Saudi Arabia. There's a reason we talk about Saudi Arabia's on the front pages. There's a reason Saudi Arabia always ends up in the mix in so many different scenarios, as opposed to a place like Ghana. So anyway,
or Belgium.
or Belgium.
Going on from here, we'll swap. You use Belgium.
There you go.
Well, and I think we should probably close. But Mark, I wanted to say, when you talked about being young Saudi and male, one of the very endearing things you discussed was their curiosity with marriage, and
Yes.
I just thought it was like I said, it was endearing. It was very human.
Yes, and also because until you're married in the kingdom, you're not really fully part of society. Well, no, you're not. I mean, it is a, I mean, during the pandemic, in Saudi Arabia, the main concern was sort of, when can we get back to having weddings and going to wedding parties? What pubs are in the UK, So no, it's an incredibly important part of life, and so getting married is just something that you have to do, and it's family expectations and all of these types of things. So it's no surprise that when you sit down with young men, you don't have to be writing a book, but when you sit down with young men, at some stage, the conversation will turn to, getting married, because it's that sort of milestone that, when you get to a certain age, is going to happen. But, attitudes to, I mean, pretty much everybody I know, and all the I've been to hundreds of weddings over the years, but they're pretty much all traditional weddings. People get married in the traditional way. I was at one just recently in Abu Arish, outside Jizan, people get married in the traditional way because, again, it all goes back to these powerful identity narratives, this sense of this is what we do, and the sense of the importance of family and all of this. I think sometimes when we talk about Saudi Arabia, we tend to talk about change too much at the moment. And actually, we shouldn't be talking about change. We should be talking about things adapting. And this is what we see, for example, with marriage, whereas the traditional way of marriage is still prevalent, but it's adapting in that now, people can get to know each other, before they get married, to find out whether they're compatible or not compatible, and this is very much now part of how things are done. Yes. But weddings are, an incredibly important part of Saudi social life, as anybody who knows the kingdom will tell you. And depending on where you go in the kingdom, of course, goes to some pretty spectacular weddings as well.
We've been talking to the brilliant Dr. Mark Thompson. Follow him on Twitter at ThompsonMarkC. He's got a new book coming out as well. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. This was really fascinating.
Oh, no, thank you very much. I really appreciate having the opportunity.